1, 2, 3, funk it.
My darling, I love you, 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 I love you.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. This is the one and only Maverick podcast. I'm your host, DJ Maverick. Today, we have a man of many talents. We have a husband, a father, actor, model, award-winning independent filmmaker, college professor, and social activist, the one and only Marlon Ladd. Welcome to the Maverick podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like I should have dropped like some air horns in between all those talents, right? Like
That was good. I love the intro though, man. That was nice. That was nice.
Maybe for the 1% of the people out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So that's kind of a loaded question. So as you just said, I do a lot.
When do you sleep?
It's tough. I've been wondering here lately how I can get more sleep.
Right.
But I am a filmmaker. I've done a lot of things in my life. I'm older than I actually look. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But I love film. I got into film as an independent filmmaker. And so just being an African-American filmmaker, the reason why I started doing my own films is because I didn't see the kind of roles that I wanted to play out there. And so I had to create those kind of roles. And so through doing that, I learned how to do everything behind the scenes, direct, write. I was already acting, learned how to edit. So from that point on, it was a wrap.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you grow up here in Oklahoma or where did you grow up here?
Born and raised, Oklahoma.
Okay. Where'd you go to high school?
Went to Millwood.
Millwood, okay. Did you do any sports or what were you
Played
into?
basketball, state champion.
Oh, yeah? Nice.
We had the best basketball team to ever come through Millwood. All right. Still to this day.
Humble brag right there, right?
Yeah. We were the first Millwood team ranked in USA Today.
Wow. Okay.
We beat the 6A state champions, 5A state champions, 4A state champions, won the 3A state championship, and beat the number one team in Arkansas.
Cool.
And so, yeah.
That's very cool. Did you like pursue that throughout college? Or
I did. I played basketball in college. I played for Rose State and I played for Langston, where I teach now.
That's awesome. What position did you play?
Point guard.
Point guard.
Point
oh,
guard.
Man. So who's like your GOAT point guard?
Right now, I like Steph Curry.
Steph Curry? Okay.
And the reason why I like him is because he can shoot.
Yeah.
And I think shooting is like extremely important. And so that translates to being able to shoot free throws, and it just makes you a threat.
For
you know,
sure.
like you can't.
He's like unstoppable, right?
Right.
Like he can't block
you can't
the
leave
dude.
him open at all from anywhere. Like he's going to light you up.
Yeah. I saw a video of him where he was like way at the other side of the court and he was just making them. But someone said that was AI, that it wasn't real. I don't know if that's true or not.
Some of those are, but he can actually make those shots.
Yeah.
Like he's one of those kids that was always around basketball and he would just be doing trick shots all the time because he's always around basketball. He would get bored. So some of those he can actually do.
So important question. Are you a Thunder fan or what is your NBA affiliation there?
So I'm not a sort of team fan. I like players.
Okay.
And so, for instance, like if Steph Curry went to a different team, I would be pulling for that team because I like the player.
Okay.
My favorite player back in the day was Charles Barkley. So whatever team he played on, that's who I was with. So with the Thunder, when they came here, everybody's like, yeah, now we got a team, the Thunder. And I was like, yeah, you know, I like them, but I'm not going to rock with them. Like, and now everybody's gone. They're doing good now. Yeah. But everybody's gone. You know, KD left.
Everybody's
Westbrook
traded.
left. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
So I'm like, I like him, but I'm not like a diehard.
Yeah. I was pretty excited about Chet, and then he got like injured all of a sudden, but I think he's back now, so that's cool. But that was like the one guy I was like, okay, maybe there's some
Can
hope
follow
here,
him.
you know?
Yeah, I saw they scored 153 points the other day. I was like, what is happening?
What's up with that? Right?
Yeah. So they're hooping.
That's cool. I like that. So college, we're hooping, and then what else? What was your major in college?
So my major in college was initially pre-law political science, and then it was English. Okay. So my plan was to graduate with an English degree, and then I was going to get my master's and go to the FBI.
Oh, wow.
So that was my plan.
Okay.
So I ended up still going into law enforcement. I was a state police officer, undercover. And so it got to the point where I kind of learned more about the FBI, and I decided while I was a state police officer that I really didn't want to go that route. So I left being a state police officer to pursue my film career full time. I just basically walked away.
Yeah. And I think you have to make that decision because there's like an age limit for the FBI, right?
Yeah, it's okay. So, you know, the federal government has these discrimination laws, right? They're like, you can't discriminate against anybody for age, race, ethnicity.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then they're like, you have to be 37.
Right,
If you're older than 37, we won't hire you. It's like, what?
Yeah.
The
I didn't never
hypocrisy in
thought
that.
about that. That's an interesting point.
Such hypocrisy. It makes no
Yeah,
sense.
because a lot of people, I mean, in college, you're even still trying to figure it out, right?
Right.
So to have that age limit, it's kind of like, okay, is it going to be a go or no go? It's
Right.
like kind of early to call it at that point. you know?
And, everybody's, for whatever reason they're doing that, everybody's age 37 is not the same.
That's true.
So, if you're looking at it like, oh, they would be too old, like, no, there's some 25-year-olds that are too old and some 40-year-olds that could run circles around them.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about the people that put in the work in the gym, right?
Yes.
And the dedication. There's people that are way young, but they're not in the gym, right?
Yes. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. Never thought about that. So you decided you're going to pursue filmmaking. How did that go?
So, like, I come from a middle-class family, and you were going to go to college, right? So
Same
you had
here.
to get a
It's
degree.
like, you got to go. That's the way out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you had to get a degree in something that was going to make some money. And so I didn't see a pathway for acting or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I started working on my master's that I met a professor who taught me screenwriting and playwriting.
Okay.
And then we had this play that we had to do. It was called Oklahoma Voices or something. And we could cast our own people in our play. And we would do like 10 minutes of the play.
Okay.
So I cast myself because, of course, I wanted to be an actor.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
cool.
she saw me. She was an actress at the time as well. And so she hooked me up with somebody else. I did like a DHS commercial. Then I did another DHS commercial. And then I eventually got an agent. And
Nice.
so then I did an independent film that my son had auditioned for. He didn't get the role, but I got a role. And so the guy taught me all the behind the scenes. And from that point, I was like, it's a wrap. This is what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah. I don't know if your mom is like my mom, but my mom would have been like, I don't care if you think that's a rap. It's not a rap. Let's get a job.
Yeah,
here,
you're
right?
like, you better get a job. Yeah, that's exactly how my mom was. And my dad, too. They were like, and even when I left being a state police officer, they were like, why are you leaving?
Right.
You don't need to leave.
Like you've got benefits, you got a retirement, you got all these things, right?
Yeah, and so what I realized later is that it wasn't them like not being supportive because they were always supportive, but being parents, they don't want to see you struggle.
Sure.
And so they knew that there was going to be some struggle with that. However, you can't build character without struggle.
Right.
Like, it's an impossibility. And so they were just trying to protect me.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me, I don't know, like, what type of neighborhood you grew up in, but I grew one that was like pretty tough, right? Pretty rough around the edges, right? And so I had friends that were into gangs, that were into things that they shouldn't be, right? But I was friends with everybody. And even to this day, if I see you, like, we're still cool, right? Like you becoming sort of, a police officer, did that sort of like change any friendships or anything or no?
No, it's kind of strange. Back then, it really didn't. It seemed like back then there was a different climate about police and police brutality.
Okay.
I mean, my parents came from a generation where they were like, like I got stopped by the police before I was a police officer. And, I've always kind of had a smart mouth. And so I still knew the law back then. And so if they were trying to make me do something that was unlawful, like I would tell them, that I know my rights. So my mom chastised me one time when I got pulled over about that. And she was like, boy, they could have killed you. You had parked in the middle of nowhere, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Mom, that's not going to happen. But she had seen different things, right? And so for me, I hadn't seen anything like that. I knew that there was racism and discrimination, but it just wasn't to the level where we see it today. Because today we have not just news articles, we have video evidence. Yeah. And it keeps happening.
And it's tough to watch. I mean, you see it over and over.
It is, yeah.
And there for a while, you would think that it was like different races and stuff. But I mean, it's almost like, I don't know if it's a training issue or what. I don't know what your thoughts are.
It's an overall systemic problem. And so I was in it. So I have like I guess a different viewpoint because I could see it from the inside out. But I've also done a lot of history. Yeah. Police departments started from, they're descendants of slave patrols. And so slave patrols were basically a bunch of white men looking for runaway slaves. And they didn't really have to abide by the law. They could come to your house and be like, I think there's a runaway slave in there and we're coming in. Oh, man. Right? And so police departments started, the first one was in South Carolina, and they started not to enforce laws, but to separate the classes. Right? So if you were middle class or lower class, like, don't be over here messing with higher class people or whatever the case may be. So it's basically them kind of being bullies. Okay. And so the system over the years hasn't changed very much because who you see them hiring is still people that are predominantly white.
Yeah.
They're looking for people that have the propensity and the skill to be violent. Like, hey, if you served in the military, okay, you know how to kill somebody and fire a gun. Like, come on. And so it's like the qualifications are very low, in my opinion. Like two of the biggest police departments, the LAPD and NYPD, one of them requires 60 hours of college. One of them only requires a high school diploma.
Okay.
And then all you have to do is pass the physical, pass the psychological evaluation, and not have any felonies. And you have to be 21.
Okay.
So,
and then you just go through their academy or
Yes.
what's that? Okay.
Yes. And so
Right.
for somebody to be 21, 22 years old, to have a gun, to make a life and death decision,
True.
no, that's not a good idea.
Yeah. And it's like always like, you know, high risk situations.
Yes.
Like you have to make decisions like, you know, in seconds, right? Like you need a
Yes.
lot of training for that.
Right. And if you can't handle stress, if you don't have a certain respect for human life, you're going to get in trouble every time. And then there's a certain power trip that comes with having a badge and a gun. And I know that because I used to be a cop. And so I had that attitude until I was checked for it. And when I was checked for it, I thought about it and I was like, yeah, okay. So I was like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of police officers take things personal. They pull you over and they ask you to do something and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I know my rights. They're like, what? Who are you talking to? Step out of the car. And then you're like, no, I know my rights. I don't have to step out of the car. Then what are they going to do? They're going to be like,
escalate,
you defied me, so I'm going to snatch you out of the car. And then what was a traffic stop for speeding, which is a misdemeanor, turns into something else. And it shouldn't.
Yeah. So did that sort of fuel your desire to leave being a cop or
No, it was, I had been a police officer for almost 9 years. And so I had done everything that I wanted to do there. So it was either leave to be a full-time filmmaker or go to the FBI.
I see.
And so since I decided I wasn't going to the FBI, there was nothing else that I wanted to accomplish where I was working.
Got it.
And so it was time. You can feel it. It was time.
And then what was sort of the path to be a filmmaker, right? Because there's not really a direct path, right? Like you have to make things happen. So walk me through that process.
Especially here.
Yeah.
So this was my grand plan.
Okay.
It didn't work out so
We're going to take notes right here. This is how to be a filmmaker.
No, this is how not to do it. Don't do it this way.
All right.
So what I decided was I had retirement money and I had like sooner saved money saved up. So I said, okay. And I was newly married. So I said, this is what we're going to do. I have enough money to sustain us. If you pay your half, I'll pay my half for at least 10 months. I'm working on this film. I'm going to get this film done. And when this film is done, then we're going to get an advance. And then that's going to take care of everything. And then we'll move forward from there. Okay. So that was the plan.
So you were going to be independent from the get-go?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what happened was my ex-wife's check ended up getting garnished. So she couldn't pay her half of the things that she was supposed to pay.
Yeah.
So then I had to dig in more. Actually, I think my money was supposed to last for a year and a half. And I think it only lasted for 10 months because I ended up having to pay more.
Sure.
So then we started not getting along. So I went from making this film, newly married. We had a really expensive house. I had 2 or 3 cars and a motorcycle, to divorce, house in foreclosure, and then I'm working part-time as a security guard.
Jeez.
And my dad had to buy me like a $5,000 car.
Yeah. And you weren't even finished with your film at that point, or?
I finished it at some point during that, but then it was about trying to find distribution.
Okay.
And
that
so
was my next question.
Yeah, so I didn't find the kind of distribution that I wanted that I thought would take care of everything. And so, like I said, I'm working part-time as a security guard, but I'm still making films.
Yeah.
So I found an online community, and I kind of got my skill level up from that online community. It was called DVX User. It was a new camera that had just come out. It was a digital camera, and it was supposed to emulate film. It shot 24 frames per second, so it was a big movement.
Yeah.
So they had all these online film festivals about, with different genres. They were like, okay, this is the horror festival. This is the action festival. So it made you do films. And what they would do is they would have other filmmakers on the forum. They would watch your film, and they would critique it. And it was constructive criticism.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I thought I was on this level.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing those films, I realized I was down here and I had a lot to learn. So I took my lumps, I learned from that, and then just moved forward.
Yeah. So tell me sort of, let's say if everything would have worked out, what's the sort of road to get your movie monetized? Like what do you do? I'm not a filmmaker, right? So you've got this excellent story you're going to tell with your film. How do you make money?
So now it's changed because technology has changed. So back then, this was around 2007, 2008. So YouTube was just on the horizon. Streaming services, the only one was Netflix. So I did actually get that film that I finished on Netflix, but this is when they were sending out DVDs, right? So they weren't even streaming yet, right? And so the pathway now is there are so many different ways. You can stream, you can get on YouTube, get a YouTube channel. The film that I did I finished in 2012 called Bad to the Jones. I decided that I wasn't going to do another distribution deal because people take advantage of you.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what? I think this film is good. I'm going to take it directly to the people. So I put it up on YouTube.
Got it.
So the first episode, because I divided it into 6 or 8 episodes, first episode to this day has almost 1 million views.
Nice.
And I got a distribution deal a few years later from that.
Okay.
From all that exposure.
So is a distribution deal sort of similar to like a record deal where they take sort of like a cut of everything? Is it like, how does it work as far as like distribution of percentages and all that?
It depends on what kind of deal you get and what kind of company you're working with. And so, you know, they might say, and this is what distribution companies typically do. They're like, okay, we're going to take your film and we're going to pay you 20% royalties after you have paid back your advertising fees.
Okay.
So they say, we're going to take your film, we're going to spend $60,000 on advertising. And once that's paid back, then we'll start paying you 20%.
Got it.
And that's not a good deal.
Yeah.
Number one, they're not going to spend $60,000.
Yeah.
Number two, your film might not make $60,000. So you're going to get 20% of nothing.
And do they make the promise that your film is going to end up in movie theaters, or is that not a guarantee?
No, there's no guarantee. Now, to end up in a theater, that's a whole different level than streaming or back in the day getting into a store DVDs.
Yeah.
Right. So getting to the theatrical level costs a lot of money. So when you go to the movies and you see like the first thing you see is like Universal or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the distribution company.
Oh, okay.
So what they have done is they have taken like 3,600 theaters across the country and they have paid for your film to be in those theaters. And so that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's
Sure.
actually millions of dollars, right? And so they're banking on making that money back, right? But they have to pay to get your film in there. So if you get a theatrical release, that's huge, but that's very expensive. So on an independent level, you're not doing that unless you go theater to theater, city to city. Like, let's say you rent out a theater for $2,000, right? Let's say it seats 300 seats, and you say, okay, I'm gonna charge everybody $10. Okay,
Yeah.
so you paid $2,000 for the theater, you made $1,000, right? Then you can move on from that and keep going, right?
It's hard to scale that though.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So that's one way to do it on a real independent level. You can get an aggregator that's kind of a middleman that says, okay, I have a relationship with DJ Maverick, right? So you don't know him. Just give me your film. I'll talk to him, see if he wants to take it. And if he does, you and I will make a deal. And that's normally how it works because there's so many filmmakers out there that like Netflix is not trying to talk to me or you or Omar, right? So you have to have a middleman. So if you can get in with an aggregator or a middleman like that, it helps your cause.
And is it also similar to the tech world where there's like VCs, like capitalists, like venture capitalists that want to invest in movies? Or,
Oh yeah.
or no? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You just have to, I've never been good at like asking people for money because I have a real sort of rebellious attitude. And so I'm just like, if I ask somebody for money and they're like, no, I'm like, I'm shooting it anyway.
Right.
Like, I don't care if you give me the money or not.
And the thing is, they might change your creative direction, right? So if you're a creative, you probably want to tell the story how you want to tell it. Right.
And so if you can find an investor that says, listen, I love your talent. I'm just going to put some money behind it and I'm going to stand back over here. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But some investors aren't like that. They want to, and this is what you call an executive producer. So when you see the credits in movies, that's what an executive producer is.
Got it.
And so some of them will just be on you all the time and trying to change all kind of things. And it's like, this is not fun. And this is not what I signed up for.
Or they might say, hey, zombies are hot right now. Write in a zombie or something, right? Like we want to make this sort of appeal to what's popular right now.
Yes,
right?
yes. And you've signed a contract. So there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
You know.
Got it. So you're probably stressing at that point, right? Like you left your job, you know, your finances are like running out. What's the game plan after that?
And so the game plan was basically faith. I was living in, our big house, which was 3 bedrooms, an office, and a living room with no gas.
Jeez.
In the winter.
In Oklahoma.
Yes. Didn't have any money to pay for it. And so I had a little dog at the time. So it was me and my little dog sitting in front of an electric heater, just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was about keeping going. Right. Because for me, like, because I love this and I'm passionate about it, like, I don't know how to stop.
Yeah.
And so I just won't. And so I just kept going and kept going. And so it just, like, I was getting the experience while this was going on. And the funny thing is, I learned a lesson, which was, as long as I'm making films, I'm happy. And so it didn't matter how much money I had, didn't matter what kind of cars I drove, because before I was putting a lot of stock in that. It's like, look what kind of car I drive, I'm real cool, right? Look what kind of house I have, I'm real cool.
But deep down, you weren't happy, right? Like there was always something missing deep down, right?
Yes. And so I learned a valuable lesson. So I was like, I don't care about cars. I don't care about the house.
Yeah.
Like, I care about, family is important to me. I care about making movies, and, the money will come. Some people do things for money.
Yeah.
And if you're doing things for money, it's not going to make you happy if you're not already happy.
Right.
So for me, it's about the art. It's about the stories that I want to tell. And again, I want to inspire people. I want to give people hope. I want to tell people stories that they haven't heard before. And if I'm doing that, then I'm doing my job.
Got it. When I'm about to sort of take on an opportunity, I always think of 3 things that I could potentially get, right? Number 1 is, of course, money, right? If you can get money out of the project you're about to do, great, right? Second thing might be experience. You might get experience out of it, right? Third thing most people don't think about is network.
Yeah.
You might get
Exposure.
a cool network out of it, right? So that's usually what I think about those 3, right? Is that sort of what you were measuring when you were like, okay, my next project, I need to get something out of it? Like, what was the next step after that?
Yeah, I was like, I kind of told myself that if my film Bad to the Jones, if it wasn't successful, then it was like, why am I even doing this? Like, I wasn't going to stop, but it was still like, if I can't sell this film, then like, I need to change something up, right? There's that saying, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, it's insanity. And so I was always thinking about that. But I was like, okay, so I know how to make a film, and, I don't have the connections that I want yet.
Sure.
But I was just like, they'll come, So once I started my YouTube channel and it started picking up, then I was like, okay, so I'm going to create some film, some content for my channel, right? And so I was doing that. That was also giving me experience. And so then we started a film called The Deal almost 4 years ago. And so it's a feature film, still finishing it up right now. And it's definitely the best thing that I've ever done.
That's
so
awesome.
All the experience culminated into this film, like story, acting, cinematography, editing, like everything.
And you were like a one-man show. You were the director, the editor, like you were doing everything?
I was executive producer, producer, but not by myself. So I had a co-executive producer. My wife was there as well. We had 4 other producers. The producers are the people on the ground that manage every shoot, right? And so I'm acting in the film, and then I've edited the film. I've done the sound design, and so now we're working on the surround sound. Yeah. So, and right before we were about to shoot, we had hired a DP to run the camera. Dude dropped out like the day before. Jeez. And so we had like all this equipment. We had a red camera with like really expensive Cook lenses.
Oh, so you were like big budget. You're like, we're going to compete with the big boys,
yeah. This
right?
was like the biggest budget we've had.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And so he dropped out. And so I was like, you know what? I've done this before.
Yeah.
And so one of my producers was like, we need to pack it in. We need to, regroup and come back. And me and my co-executive producer, we were like, mm-mm. And so he was like, man, talk to him and tell him that we can do this. I was like, listen, we are doing this. I was like, I'm used to running the camera. Like, I'm used to doing all these things. So this is not anything new for me. So for the first, 30% of the film that we shot, I was directing and running the camera and acting in front of the camera.
Did you own a red camera? Because those things look complicated. Like I'm
They
used
are.
to a mirrorless, a Sony, right? If I'm looking at a red camera, it looks a bit intimidating.
Well, it's not as complicated as you think.
Okay.
Everything is like a touch screen on the cameras, and so as long as you know what you're looking for,
Okay, you'll figure it out.
yeah.
Okay.
And so it wasn't my camera, but one of the producers, which is a friend of mine out of LA, they had driven down for the shoot, so they had all the equipment. But man, what I was doing was, again, I was directing and I was in front of the camera, but I was also responsible for all of the equipment. So every day when we were done, I'm packing up all of this gear, loading it back up in the truck, and then I'm going all the way home. And I'm exhausted because I've done all these things, and then I have to unload all that stuff, and then I have to go through the footage, and then I have to charge the batteries for the camera to make sure that they're ready for the next morning, and then I got to turn around and do it again.
What are we talking, like 18-hour days, 16-hour days?
Yeah, it's like
what are we
16-hour days.
It's crazy.
Initially. But once we finally found a good DP that we liked, it was a lot easier because he had all the equipment.
Yeah.
So he would show up with that. I didn't even have to worry about that. All I had to worry about was directing and acting.
Got it. Did you pursue other acting opportunities too, or were you just like all in with your projects, being independent?
I had an agent at that time, but Oklahoma is kind of, especially back then, they were really slow with like films and like national TV commercials. It just didn't happen. When Hollywood films would come here, they might use our crews, but they're not using the actors.
I see.
It's almost like they thought we weren't capable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, at some point I decided to drop my agent because I was like, I want to do films and you're not getting me any. So I dropped the agent and I was just doing my own thing for a while. So then fast forward to last year, I realized that a lot of auditions are online now.
Okay.
And so I was like, I have time to do that. I don't have time to run to a bunch of auditions, but I have time to do them online.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing.
Because the film industry here in Oklahoma has done like a 180, right? Like it's like crazy how much it's grown in a short amount of time. Right?
It has. Now we got like at least 2 studios here.
And I want to congratulate you because Tulsa King. Tell me about that. That's pretty awesome to have on your resume.
Yeah. I was trying to get that on my IMDb for a long time. I was like, it's not on my IMDb. Where is it? Where is it? I need that. Yeah.
How did that happen?
So I got an audition from my agent. And I think that was probably, so this audition that I got from them was 4 different roles.
Okay.
So it was the ATF Tech 1, which is the one that I got. There was an ATF 2, and then there was 2 cops. Yeah. And so we had to send in all 4 of those at once. And then even before then, I had been sent, I think 3 or 4 other auditions from them, like that I didn't get.
Okay.
And so when I sent this one in, I didn't think, I was going to get it.
Yeah.
I was like, they're probably looking at hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yeah. And you got a cool role because it's not like you're just like someone in the background for a split second or something.
Right.
Like, most people would be excited about that alone, right?
Right.
But you got a cool role.
Yeah. I mean, when they came back and they were like, we want Marlon Ladd. It's a co-starring role and blah, blah, blah. I was like, co-star.
Like, is this a prank call?
Yeah,
What's
I was
up
like,
here?
What? I was like, okay. I was like, let's go.
Yeah.
So, I was excited.
Tell me about what was that experience like working with so many? Did you meet Sylvester Stallone? Like, what happened?
I did not get to meet him. He was filming at a different location that day.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest set that I've ever been on.
Cool.
So I did a Boiling Point Media. They did a film called Ghoster I think it was released last year.
Okay.
So I played the bad guy in that film. And so that's a Lionsgate film.
Awesome.
And so I was on that set. And that set was big. I was like, look at all this.
Lionsgate.
This is nice. Yeah. And so when I got on the set of Tulsa King, as soon as I drove up, I was like, okay, this is something different. Because they had these huge crane lights outside. They had this building that had 3 floors. And they had the lights shining in from the outside to emulate like sunlight.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, this is huge. And I've
was it here local?
Yes, it was in Oklahoma City.
In Oklahoma City. Okay. Which building or where was it?
It was at some old building. I think it used to be like AT&T or something somewhere. I didn't recognize
like
the building when I
random
got there.
office or something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so we get there and like on these sets, because this is a SAG film. And so you will have like a trailer And when you go in your trailer, you will have like the sides, which are your lines, but it has all the sides for everything that they're shooting that day.
Okay.
And so then, we had to go to wardrobe before we show up on set. And so you go in there, they've got your wardrobe all lined up and everything. Awesome. And so then, you get dressed, you're looking over your lines. Mm-hmm. Then they send you to, this is the first time I got sent to hair and makeup.
Okay.
I've been sent to makeup before, but not hair and makeup.
Yeah.
And those are two separate trailers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So went to both of those. And then, on film sets, there's a saying called hurry up and wait. There's a phrase called hurry up and wait. And so what it is like you wait for a long time until it's your time to go. And then it's like, okay, hurry up. Let's get this done. So, that's what it was. Yeah. And so it wasn't really rushed like that. But when we get there, it was me and a guy named Chris. He was in the scene with me. And so he had come down from Tulsa. And so the PA, which is the production assistant, takes us up to where we're filming. So we're walking through the building, and I'm just seeing it's so massive. I mean, there's trailers everywhere. Yeah. There's people. There's extension cords and
and up to this point,
radios.
You had experience, but were deep down, were you still a little bit nervous, or you're like, nah, I got this. I've done this. This is my first rodeo. Right?
I wasn't nervous. I was anxious to see what it was going to be like because, I'm thinking it's not going to be really anything different than what I've done before. But then I knew it was going to be different. Yeah. And so when we walk up to the third floor, that's when it hit me. I was like, okay, this really is different because there was probably 100 to 150 people on that floor. And this was supposed to be an ATF office. And it looked like an ATF office. They had computers everywhere with like mug shots on the computer screens. And it was just massive. So the PA is walking us through, takes us over to the director, introduces us to the director. And so it was like ATF Agent 1 and ATF Agent 2. And so they kept asking, okay, who's ATF Agent 1? Yeah. And I didn't want to be like, that's my role, but you got to, I mean, you don't want them to switch it up.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah. So met the director. He was real cool. And so he was like, okay, let's sit y'all down and let's go through the lines. Let's rehearse. So then he says, all right, everybody, or the first AD was like, all right, everybody, we're rehearsing, which meant for everybody to be quiet.
Okay.
So all 100 and however many people are on that floor.
Silence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so now it's like all eyes are on us.
Nice.
And that is something new and different because when you act on film, you're acting for the camera. There might be, maybe 15 people, but this,
you don't have an audience.
You don't have an audience. It's not like a stage play or anything.
Yeah.
And these are like all people in the business, right? So it's like if ever you were going to mess up your lines, you can't do it now. Right?
And meanwhile, had you rehearsed the lines? Like they gave them way ahead of time?
Yeah, they gave them way ahead of time. Okay. But, you can still mess up on those lines just because, you're nervous or whatever. So I was like, okay, can't mess up on the lines. Let's go through this. So we go through it. And so then they're like, okay, y'all go ahead and go get mic'd up.
Yeah.
Then they were like, bring in the stand-ins.
Okay.
And I was like, stand-ins?
What is that exactly?
A stand-in is when they're setting up the camera. They will bring in people to sit where you're supposed to sit.
Just to like focus and
get the lighting. Yeah. Okay. And so I was like, that's almost like having a stuntman. I was like, I never had a stand-in
That's pretty
before.
Cool. Yeah.
So we go, get mic'd up and everything. And, they give us our badge and everything that we're supposed to have. Then we come back and then it was really go time.
Yeah.
Now they're like, okay, everybody quiet on the set.
And you were like, Jay-Z, nailed it. First cut, no retake.
Yep. Didn't mess up on the lines at all.
Nice.
Went through it, and then it was over, and it was like, oh, okay. And then you're thinking,
just flew by or what?
It flew by.
There wasn't like, okay, let's try it again, but like, give me a little bit more of this.
Well, they did, yeah. So it kind of changed the inflection of one of my lines because my audition, I was supposed to say when I see something on the screen, I was supposed to say, "What the." Like that, right?
Yeah.
So when I did it in the audition, it was like real overt. I was like, and so he was like, okay, let's do it like not as much. And so I was like, you mean like, so I did it a certain way. And he was like, yep, perfect. Did it like that. So they filmed that, I think they filmed it about 3 or 4 times. And then they filmed the reverse of the computer screen. And so when I saw it, because you don't know if you're going to get cut, right? Because I kept thinking like, okay, I know it kind of said episode 9, but I don't know if it's going to be episode 9. And so I was watching the whole season. Then I was like I think it was episode 7. One of the characters was talking about getting that computer. And I know that was the computer that I was on.
So meanwhile, you didn't ever get to see the footage.
No.
You didn't know what the end product was going to be.
You don't know nothing. And so then, so I was like, okay, she's getting the computer. So that means my scene is coming up. So she goes in and tries to get the computer. And then on the show, like she gets killed. So I was like, okay, man. I'm not going to be on this episode.
That sucks.
So then the day that we shot, Sylvester Stallone was shooting at a different location. And so when I saw that scene, that was in episode 8. I was like, hey, that's what he shot that day. I was like, I'm going to be on this episode.
Like we're getting close.
Yes. And then there was nothing. So I was like, okay, so I guess it is going to be episode 9. And then I didn't even see it before people started calling me.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they were like, man, I just saw you. And it was people that didn't know I was going to be on the show.
That's awesome.
And they were like, I saw you on Tulsa King, blah, blah, blah. You look great. You look great. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm like, okay, so my scene is in there. So then I'm anxious to see it. And then I finally saw it, and it was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations on that. I didn't know that that's the way it worked. I just always assumed that you would get a preview or something that, hey, like this is what the end product's going to look like, but it's all under wraps. And,
like you don't know.
You're seeing it same as like everybody else.
Yes. Now, if I was like one of the main actors, I might be privy to be able to see some of that, but you just have to wait and see if you even made the cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever take acting lessons or anything along the way, or how did you just kind of like get used or experience around acting?
So people kind of look at me crazy when I say that I didn't,
Yeah.
right? Because most people do. I grew up in front of the camera, my brother and I. So my dad used to have a bunch of cameras. He filmed everything that we did. So if we played sports, he was filming that. And so we graduated to filming stuff like ourselves. Like I tried to shoot my first film when I was 12 with one of his cameras. You know,
awesome.
I organized a karate film.
Yeah.
Got all the neighborhood kids, and we shot this whole action sequence. And then I realized there was like no film in the camera.
Oh, man.
So that wasn't meant to be. But being in front of the camera makes you comfortable, right? And so you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I sound like that? I move like that? I make facial expressions like that? And so when I would see movies and I would see like emotional scenes or people angry, I would emulate those after the movie. And so that was kind of my practice. So then when I get in front of the camera, I'm natural because I've been in front of it my entire life.
I see.
And then I practice these expressions. And so for me, I don't try and like overthink it. I just try and be natural with it.
How do you get into the character that you're supposed to be playing? Do you just like, as soon as you get on set, you're acting like the character, or do you not turn it on until like they say, okay, action?
I usually don't turn it on until action.
Okay.
So what you're talking about,
because I've heard a lot of actors like this guy shows up in character, the day of, and he will not break character.
Yeah,
right?
that's called method acting.
Method acting. Yeah.
And my opinion on that, I think that's dumb.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, because what people do is they get into this character and then they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
Like, so I read Will Smith's his biography, and he was talking about for his first role, which was in the movie 6 Degrees of Separation, he did method acting.
Okay.
And so he said he got so into it that he could not turn it off. So he was still filming The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but he wasn't Will anymore. He was this character from 6 Degrees of Separation.
Really?
So he lost his comical sense of humor. He lost his timing. He lost all these things. And he said he didn't get it back until midway through the season. And so he was like, that was the last time like I did method acting. And I've heard some other horror stories, but I guess to each his own. But for me, I'm able to like turn it on and turn it off. And that's probably because I direct too. So like I've got a director's hat on until I get in front of the camera. Then once I get in front of the camera, then I'm trying to be actor mode, but I still also have to be the director because I have to look at the shot afterward. So I guess for me, it's a little bit different than it would be for other actors. And I have the advantage of acting in something, and then because I'm editing it, I can see that, right? Okay. So having that experience, like if we film something on set and then I'm looking at the LCD screen, like I know if I like that or not.
So in your head, you're kind of almost directing already and thinking about what the edit might look like because you have experience in all that, right?
Yes. And so it's like a director directing an actor, like what's required for that scene. And so all of that kind of flows out through me.
Yeah.
And
Another
so-
funny thing about Will Smith and the Fresh Prince, I don't know the early episodes if you ever noticed, but he memorized everybody's lines.
Yeah, and he was mouthing the
Yeah,
words.
he's like
Yeah, that's what he talked about in his book. Yeah.
It's pretty funny to see if you go back and watch him. Like he'll say something and then he's like lip syncing like Carlton's line or something. as he's saying
Yeah.
it.
And he was like, nobody noticed it because everybody's paying attention to like who was talking.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't even know. They had to tell him he was doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So after Tulsa King, like what's next? Like where do you go from here?
I'm trying to finish up my film called The Deal. So right now we're finishing up the 7.1 surround sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
like this is on the
Yeah,
level, right?
yeah.
So finishing that up, and then I just got through editing a film for some friends of mine in LA. So that's done. That's off my plate. I have to do a trailer for that one. And then they're going to come down in March, and we're supposed to shoot a film. And then we're shooting another film this summer called Beauty, Grace, Malice. And I'm writing that script. I'm about halfway through.
So you write too.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And see, that's what I got my master's in, was creative writing.
Okay.
So the creative writing and the acting is kind of what I had first. And then everything else, the editing, the directing, all that stuff came after.
Okay. So I geek out about gear. So you mentioned 7.1. What does that mean? Like, how do you, like, what do you, is that like just mics everywhere? Like, what do you do for that?
So no, actually. So this is something that you do like in post-production.
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, on the bigger sets, they probably do have like mics for different things. They're like, okay, this mic is going to pick up that sound. You know, this is going to pick up the actor. This is going to pick up this. But for us, we just had, the mics on the actors. And so what you do afterward is when you're editing and you do sound design, you have your sound effects. So if it's a fighting scene, for instance, you got to have punch sounds. You got to have like blocking sounds.
And you got to make it come from a different direction, right? Like you can control all that.
Yes.
Right?
And so that might be one channel is like punching sounds, right? Then another channel might be atmosphere, which is like just birds in the background or something like that. So you might have 20 channels on a movie, right?
Okay.
So what you do is you take each individual channel, and when you're doing surround sound, the three main channels is where the audio dialogue goes.
Okay.
And then the rest of the channels, which would be the other four, that's where you have like the atmosphere, the Foley, the punch sound effects, and all those things. So when you have something, if you want to move it from this side of the room to this side of the room, it takes place in those speakers.
Okay.
So those front speakers are just bringing you the dialogue.
And when you're editing, does that require special headphones or special monitors? Like, how do you sort of edit all that?
So for me, what I did this time was I did the sound design, right? And so I exported all the channels, and then my partner Judo, he has his own studio, so he set up for the 7.1. So he's got the speakers everywhere. He's got all this equipment. Talking about geeking out, like this dude has always been like an equipment geek.
And he's a OKC guy, or
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Okay. That's awesome.
So his company is called Gimba Works.
Okay.
And so man, he's got all these gadgets just like everywhere.
Yeah,
he's like
buttons everywhere, huh?
Yeah, he's like a evil gear guy because he's got these things and he's like, oh, I got that. So I sit with him and we go through like everything. And it's funny because he's got these high quality speakers. My speakers at home for editing aren't that high quality.
Yeah.
So I'm putting in these sound effects and I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Then I get to his place and I'm like, what is that?
It sounds completely
that sounds
different.
terrible. Yeah. I'm like, we
Yeah.
got to change that. So we've been going through step by step, making all these little adjustments and changes and stuff.
Okay. So for the viewers out there, we're going to ask you to sign an NDA at this time. You're going to be in the circle of trust. You cannot reveal any information that we're about to discuss here. Tell me your time about you going undercover.
So, what I did when I was a police officer was I was undercover cop. So, I mean,
What was that like? So nobody knew that you worked as a police officer, or
there were some people that knew, like in our circle, like friends and family. But most of them didn't know like exactly what we did. And, we had to tell some people, it's like, hey, if you see me out, don't just be like, hey, cause you never know like who's around. I had arrested somebody one time and I remember going to the club, one time.
And they recognized you?
Yeah.
Oh,
he
man.
recognized me and confronted me.
Oh, geez.
And so for us, it was, you undercover, you carry a gun 24/7.
Yeah.
Cause you just don't know like what can pop off.
For sure.
So he confronted me and he actually thanked me
No way.
for arresting him because he said that situation like changed his life.
Interesting.
So I was
That
like,
could have gone different direction.
oh yeah,
Right?
yeah. So you kind of had to be ready for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever people would ask you, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Did you just make something up, or
Just
what
be
did you-
like, I work for the state,
For the state,
or
yeah.
I'm self-employed, or
Okay.
you know, something like that. Like we
Yeah.
never give out your information to anybody. That's like your
Yeah.
address. I had like a box address that all my mail came to, like all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So, and I was also a sniper.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me about that.
It was interesting because I love to shoot and I'm actually good at it. I don't love guns.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we've seen so many mass shooters and things like that. If they were like, we need to get rid of the guns, I'd be okay with that. But I actually like to shoot. And so, you know, you had to be an excellent shooter to like get on a team.
Yeah.
And so got on a team and, you know, we did all this training and funny story, you know, they told us about something called snake bit. And that's when you're laying down in the prone position, you got the rifle in front of you. And if you're not seated correctly and you fire the weapon, that recoil, that scope will hit you.
Oh, okay.
Hit you in the
Yeah.
head, right? And so they call that snake bit. And so what happened the first time I went out and shot? Snake bit.
Oh no.
Snake, which
Yeah.
usually happens with me. Like when I learn something, like I
Yeah.
will really jack it up the first time or the second time.
But then you're like, okay, I got it.
Yeah. Then I
learned
get
my
like,
lesson.
yes, then
Yeah.
I get like really, really good at it. So
Yeah.
what I learned about, and most people don't know this, but when you are shooting like a sniper rifle, you have to adjust for wind and distance. It's not something where you just pick up a rifle
Sure.
and you got somebody in your scopes and then you can just fire.
Yeah.
No, because you can shoot up to a mile away.
Yeah,
So
it's almost like a whole mathematical equation.
it is
right?
like we had these books and we had to like adjust things.
adjust it?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
now it's different because everything is digital. So it will do it for you. But back then you had to adjust and you had to do all these things. And then
Sure.
you would have a guy with you that would also be looking through a scope. And so if we're shooting targets, he's looking to see where it hits. And
Okay.
then he will tell you what adjustments to make. And then you go from
Got
there.
it.
Yeah.
Do you miss it at all? It sounds like you got pretty technical, pretty advanced, and all that, right? So to just walk away from it, to
Yeah,
me,
I
it's
don't-
like it might be tough.
Well, because like I said, I had done everything that I wanted to do there. And so being an actor for me, I like for the things that I do to have a sense of reality, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm playing, somebody that wields a gun or somebody that's fighting in an action sequence, like I've done that. Like I have training and I can do that. So I did what I wanted to do when I was doing it. It gave me a lot of training that I have now that's helping me do what I do. And so I don't miss it. I
see.
was done.
Okay, tell me a little bit about you being a social activist. How did you get involved in that? What are you doing as far as that's concerned? Because that's sort of like another like full-time job if you think about it, right?
Yeah. So I guess I kind of got this from my parents. My brother and I saw my parents stand up to racism a lot when we were kids.
Okay.
We didn't really understand it. And for us to see it, like we were scared back then. We didn't
Yeah.
know what was going on. And so just over the years, my parents being college educated, they would always tell us, different things. And so my dad would always say, go beyond the text of what you're reading. And basically what he was talking about was, we learn history essentially that has been propagated to us,
Yeah.
right? It's not the real history and it doesn't go deep enough and it doesn't explain a lot of things. And a lot of our history has been left out. And so at the time, I was younger, I didn't care very much. I didn't understand. But as I got older and started paying more attention, then I saw like what he was talking about.
I see.
So I started seeing all these injustices happening everywhere. And I think one of the things that changed my life was I read the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Okay.
And that just opened my eyes to a lot of different things. Well, let me back up. So I didn't really know who Malcolm X was. I knew of him,
Sure.
knew Martin Luther King Jr., because everybody talked about him. And they talked about Malcolm X and they was like, yeah, but he was violent, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know anything about him. So when I watched the film Do the Right Thing that Spike Lee did, at the very end, he had a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. and he had a quote from Malcolm X. And Malcolm X's quote stood out to me, probably because of my rebellious nature.
Yeah.
So Malcolm X said, if you hit me and I hit you back, I don't call that violence, I call it intelligence. And so I was like, yeah. And so I started doing research on him.
Yeah.
And then I found his book. And then I read the story, and I was like, it changed me forever.
Yeah, because if you think of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, it's almost like two completely different schools of leadership, right? Like, because Martin Luther King was more about like, let's not like participate in the violence. Like, let's just like, you know, remain calm, remain peaceful at all times, right?
Yeah. And Malcolm was like, don't put your hands on me.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, you know, like, that's how I feel about it. Like, if I was around back then, that's how I would have been. I'd have been like, I'm not doing the nonviolent. Like, I'm not built that way.
Right.
If I was a slave back in the day, I would have been one of the runaway slaves, because that's just my mindset.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just not going to do it.
And both were successful in their own rights, right? They both had huge movements, but if you had to sort of pick which one influenced you the most, I guess it sounds like Malcolm X.
Yes. And see, like, you know, they termed Malcolm as violent, right? But he wasn't. There's no incident on file anywhere where he committed any violence. He wasn't arrested for any kind of violence, anything. But what happened was, people considered, and what I'm talking about, white people in power, they considered Malcolm X a threat.
Sure.
Because he was like, we want our equal rights by any means necessary. And so they were like, no, you know, so they label him all these different things. He's violent, he's blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so when you look at history now, like Martin Luther King Jr., he's got everything. He's revered. He's like, hey, he did all these things, blah, 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 because they felt like he was safe, because he wanted to protest, nonviolent. He wanted to work it out. Now, he wasn't as passive as people think he was. Like, he had some serious conversations, you know, with some powerful people back then. But he just wasn't, he wasn't as
vocal, probably, right?
Yeah, he just wasn't on that level, ready to do whatever it took to get this to happen now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And it was like, if you look at the progressive movement today, that's what it's about. It's like, we've been waiting already. Like, no, we're not going to wait anymore. Like, give us our equal rights that were promised to us.
Sure.
Right now.
We were talking, you know, off camera, that you sort of started a nonprofit, right? Tell me about that.
So it's called the Code Foundation, and started it maybe a year or so ago.
Okay.
And so it's about educating and helping the community. And, you know, education is a really, really important part of that.
Yeah.
And so we have a website. It's thecodefoundation.org.
Why the code?
Circumventing oppression and demanding equality is what that means.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like reprogramming your
It
mindset,
kind of is. It kind of has a double meaning.
Yeah.
And so, again, you know, providing an education to people, and this is everybody, you know, because our history that's taught in this country is not good across the board. Like, everything that we have learned, it's been very minimal at best, and a lot of it isn't even very accurate. And so we're ignorant of our own history, and especially the history of people of color. And we're also ignorant of the history of the world. We don't even know history of the world.
That's true.
So as Americans, we are very arrogant. Like, we don't know anything about any other countries, and we barely know our own history. And so if you can teach people about the things that have happened in the past, then you can kind of see what's going on in the present and change the future. So that's what we want to do. We want to empower people with knowledge.
So the mission behind it is just education. Is that sort of like the main goal? It's
education, you know, through different ways, right? Because, you know, films and TV are very powerful. Those are very powerful mediums. And so we want to encourage that. Like, we want to do films about, you know, stories that haven't been told that need to be told about African Americans and people of color. And so that's part of the mission. We've been talking about a lot of different things, like pulling people in the community together, you know, just having talks, getting people registered to vote, just whatever we can do to let people know that, hey, you need to start paying attention. You do have some power. Exercise your power.
That's a great point. And I think when it comes to history too and learning, unless you're like yourself where you go out and seek it, right? There's really not like a modern take. So I think this is a cool idea that you have where you're incorporating video, and that will probably attract younger audiences, right? Because it's easier to digest video multimedia than versus picking up a book or doing a search online or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
and the visual is so big these days.
Yeah.
Like when Black Panther, the first Black Panther came out, they went and did interviews with people all across the world. And they went to Japan, talked to people in Japan, and they were amazed at the diversity of Black people that they saw on screen. They had no idea that existed. They were like, oh, Black people are strong, intelligent, beautiful, blah, blah. They didn't know that.
Yeah.
So what they get about America is usually what they get from TV and film. So if you don't see us, or when you do see us, we criminals, then what does that say?
Yeah, that's important. I noticed on your email signature, there was a GoFundMe for a film, Black Wall Street. Is that a project you're actively pursuing, or tell me about that? I was just like, I need to check it out.
Yeah, so,
sounds like a cool idea too.
Yeah, so I opened the GoFundMe, I think a couple of years ago. And so we're trying to raise money to do a feature film about the Tulsa Massacre.
Okay.
So my take on the Tulsa Massacre is different than somebody else's. I mean, because, people know that it was a massacre. They know that, we had this successful Black Wall Street.
And a lot of people don't even know that. Like,
there's some people that don't know that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, but my thing is, again, going beyond the text, like the Black people that we had in Black Wall Street, they were heroes, because you must understand that there was Jim Crow segregation going on back then. So it told Black people, basically where you could live, where you could work, how much money you could make.
Sure.
Like you couldn't exist in the white community and be as successful. So these Black people said, okay, there's some land over there. You don't want it? Okay, we'll go over here and we'll do our own thing. So they had all these businesses. They had private planes. They had movie theaters. They had churches. They had hospitals.
Yeah, it was amazing. A lot of wealth.
All this,
right? Like, it was amazing.
Yeah, so it was a self-sustaining community. And so when Dick Rowland got arrested on that false charge, because Sarah Page, there's something happened with them in the elevator. She said he touched her or something. They cry sexual assault and they go and arrest him. So the Black people in this community, you have to understand, they're educated, right? Some of them were World War I veterans. So they fought for this country. Yeah. So they were like, there's no Black person from here getting lynched on our watch, right? And so they went to the jailhouse to try and protect him. They go the first time. The sheriff says, hey, we got it covered. There's no problem here. Sheriff, he was a white guy. And he was honest. He was like, we got it covered. So they were like, okay. So I think the first time there was maybe, 20, 25 people that went armed. So then they started hearing these rumors that, white mob was gathering. And so they go back and there's probably 2,000 white people gathered. And so the sheriff is still like, we got this. We don't need your help. Yeah. It's under control. And they're like, are you sure? Like, yeah, we're sure. So as they're leaving, a white guy confronts this guy named O.B. Mann, who was a big guy that was a World War I veteran, and he tried to take his gun from him, calling him the N-word and telling him to give me that gun or whatever. So they're arresting him for the gun, and that guy gets shot. So then what do you have? You have this armed mob over here, and then you got these guys trying to protect Dick Rowland, so a shootout ensues. So then what happens is things spread like wildfire, because they're like, hey, these Black people, they're doing this, they're doing that. And so then you get thousands of people running into Greenwood.
Protests, right?
And so they were outnumbered, they were outgunned, and they fought for about, I don't know, it was something like 18 hours. Like they held their ground. A lot of them, ran out of the city. And so a couple of the most prominent men in Greenwood, because that's what the district was called, one of them was a guy named J.B. Stratford. He owned a hotel there, which was the biggest Black-owned hotel in the United States at the time. Okay. He was also an attorney. So think about this. This is 1921. He's an attorney.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Successful, yes. And so then another guy named A.J. Smitherman, they were the leaders of the whole thing. And so, J.B. Stratford was on the second, it was either the second or third floor of his hotel, firing at this mob coming to try and kill him and burn down his hotel. Him and some guys are like fighting tooth and nail to the very end. And so they basically said, listen, if you give yourself up, then we will not burn down your hotel. So he said, okay, that's a deal. Gave himself up. What did they do? They burned down the hotel.
Yeah.
So then they tried to charge like 56 people, 56 black people with inciting a riot. They didn't start it. They weren't the ones murdering and pillaging and stealing clothes and doing all this. That was the white mob that came in. None of them were charged. There's a guy named Dr. A.C. Jackson, who was a world-renowned surgeon. He came out of his house with his hands up, trying to surrender. One of his white colleagues told this group of white men that was walking by that had guns, like, hey, he's okay. This is Dr. Jackson. And one of the white guys shot him in the head. Man. And was never convicted anything. So there was no white people ever convicted or charged in this massacre, but they charged 56 black people.
Yeah.
And so J.B. Stratford and A.J. Smitherman snuck away, got away. For the rest of their lives, they tried to bring them back to try them for inciting a riot. They wanted to hang them. They never got them.
I see. Man, well, you definitely know your history, right? So I definitely think that it's a story that needs to be told. So I hope
Yes,
that you
absolutely.
see that project to fruition. That would be amazing to see.
Yes, I agree. And there's a reason why, like, nobody's done the story.
Yeah.
Like, people have done documentaries, but in my opinion, we don't need a documentary. We need a movie.
Right.
You know,
right.
because movies are what move people and inspire people.
Yeah.
And so I guess, you know, the time will come when I have enough money to do it like it needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I'll tell the story of these heroes.
All right. I'm going to put you on the spot. You know, you mentioned your age. I don't know if you want to disclose, but you said, you know, your age is kind of unique being in the film industry.
So I've done a lot of things.
Yeah.
So how old would you say that I am?
I don't know. I'm not a good gauge, but I would say 30s. I don't know.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. That's good. 52.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the secret?
I wish I could like claim that I have this great secret. Like I eat healthy, I work out, I try and take care of myself. But I think that God is not done with me yet.
Okay.
Like he's taken me through all these things, all these experiences, and you know, things are starting to pick up to where I can do the kind of movies that I want to do. Yeah. And so he's just not done with me, is how I look at it.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. We are getting the signal here that we're running out of time. I feel like we could keep going on. So
we could. It's a good
definitely need
conversation.
to have you back. But for the people that are interested in what you're doing, all your projects, especially if they want to contribute to the GoFundMe for the Black Wall Street, you know, where can they find you? Plug in all your social.
So I am on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok, and all you have to do is type in Marlon Ladd, MARLON LADD, and it'll pull up like all of my stuff.
Awesome.
So find me.
Cool.
Find me.
Wishing you congratulations on everything and continued success. Thank you for
I had
being
a
on the
question
Maverick
for you.
podcast.
Hold up.
You have a question for me?
Yes.
Oh, nobody's ever put me on the spot.
Okay, so
I'm a bit nervous now.
Where did DJ Maverick come from?
DJ Maverick. So the word Maverick means someone that's not conforming to, like, you know, the usual, the standards, the laws. Maverick is someone that does something unique, something different. So I just like the word Maverick.
Okay.
Right. I think that's kind of how I decided that I'm going to be in everything that I do. Right. Just because you've done something a certain way forever doesn't mean that you need to continue that. Sometimes it gets me into trouble. Sometimes it doesn't.
But that's all right.
That's the way I look at it.
So funny story. My son's name is Maverick.
No way. That's
and we
amazing.
named him Maverick for the same reason.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
So I told him about you today. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this interview.
Yeah.
His name is DJ Maverick. He was like, okay,
that's
my
awesome.
name. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just like the word. I like what it represents.
I do too. Love it.
And I think it kind of like represents me and the type of person that I'm trying to be day to day.
So how long have you had it?
Wow. I would say probably since college.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I found out that the domain was available and the social
and it was a wrap.
And I was like, this is it. I'm locking it in.
Yeah.
And since then it's been Maverick everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that was an easy question.
Yeah, it was. So you thought I was going to go
I was
deep.
like, okay, where are we going? Nobody's ever put me on the spot.
Like, where were you last week at 7 p.m.?
Yeah, especially you're talking about being undercover. And stuff. I was like, oh, man. Well, yeah, man, this has been wonderful. You know, doors always open anytime you want. You have a new project or whatever.
Yeah. Once the movie drops, okay, we're gonna have a red carpet premiere.
Okay.
I want you there.
Awesome. Let's
okay.
do it.
And Omar, I want Omar there.
Yeah, for sure.
And whoever else you want to bring,
Okay.
I want y'all there. And then we'll come back on the podcast and talk about it maybe ahead of time
Yeah.
and then maybe after.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. This super talented Marlon Ladd on the Maverick podcast. Keep grinding because in dreams we trust.